Welcome back to WHIO Reports. I'm Jim Oddie. For more information about upcoming programs, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm a J Oddie, WHIO. Now we're going to Fairborn to the campus of Wright State University, talking with Latrell Jackson, the interim dean and professor of the School of Professional Psychology. She's an expert in community engagement, juvenile justice, and a lot more. I'll begin with her background, then how the university community is embracing this call for social justice.
Well, I am very pleased that I joined the university. I've been working in a university setting ever since I graduated, actually. I believe our focus on the new generation, student development, is my passion. And that's why my career has expanded not only in clinical psychology and counseling psychology, but also in student affairs. And I believe the two come together to do a phenomenal job to prepare our next generation of leaders.
Okay, working on the campus in that environment, you're in touch with a lot of young people all the time. Are young people now as engaged as you think they maybe ought to be on this particular issue? Is there a learning curve there?
I think we have a lot of passion and excitement in our student populations. I think if they meld together their passion with the opportunity to gain wisdom from the elders who have fought civil rights efforts for years, ever since the 60s, we really could do very well together. We need the experience and the expertise of our elders and the passion of the youth, and I think that strategy will be phenomenal.
When you tell the story of the struggle for social justice, racial equality, everything on the scale from bail reform to opportunities in housing and in employment, you tell that story to young people now. Do they become more engaged, or they think, well, you know, that was 30, 40 years ago. What's happened in that time? Why aren't we there? Do they have a hard time understanding that?
I do believe that initially there is a concept of that happened before my time. I wasn't here during that period. However, I think social media is one of our greatest tools. And if we can show the impact of inequity, injustice, non-inclusion, all of those factors play a big role in becoming personally relevant for them. Young people still have compassion. They still have a sense of humanity. And if you tap into that, you can go places.
Okay, we're talking with Latrell Jackson, Dr. Jackson at Wright State University. I was anxious to talk to you because there's so much happening right now. Let's go back 2 months ago after the death of George Floyd. A lot of this all bubbled up yet again, another incident causing the nation and the world to take another look at this. First, your reaction, did it come as a surprise to you that it's not just in Minneapolis, it's now in Ohio, across the country, around the world once again?
It's disappointing that we're at this place after so much struggle. However, I did see a parallel that people often think of racism being present in the South. That is not true. We saw that from Minneapolis to Georgia. We saw murders happening in front of our eyes. That is tragic, but it also shows the universality of how racism can be evidenced and how the atrocity can be so gruesome. We witnessed someone losing their life in front of a camera. We saw a blatant disregard for being videotaped as that action occurred. That raw inhumanity, I think, was pivotal to mobilizing our nation.
Okay, so on this program, we have dealt with a lot of different people, either professionally or as a volunteer, working within their community to bring about social justice, to bring about change. Do you have any hope that this is now starting to get some traction, that things are in fact changing? The city of Dayton has 5 working groups working now on police reforms, for example. Do you see that getting any traction, though?
I do. I believe that we have some great initiatives in the community, and I believe that the partnerships between academic higher education settings and the community at large is really an excellent strategy to effect long-term change.
The goal here is, and I say this all the time when I talk with my friends about it, the goal is not to get another demonstration on the street. The goal is, and I want to ask your opinion on this, the goal is lasting change that makes a difference and builds for the future. That's not the end of it. This is a long-term journey. How do you explain that to people?
I agree. This is not a sprint, but a marathon. And so if we can look at systemic phased change, meaning phase 1, 2, and 3, having a long-term goal in addition to some short-term goals gives us the motivation to move forward in strategic ways, but also it keeps people motivated to see that it will not change overnight. We're changing attitudes, not just behaviors. And so with that being the case, we need to have a long-term and short-term trajectory so people can retain a sense of resilience and hope as we navigate it.
As those demonstrations, though, become fewer and fewer across the country, and especially even here in Ohio, does that mean that the enthusiasm level is down, or should we not take a cue from that?
I don't think we should. I think there are things behind the scenes that we may not be privy to. And those mechanisms can keep people inspired to do the right thing.
Take a minute and tell us what, in the community at Wright State University, Dr. Jackson, what is happening there? And it's not just recently, but there have been ongoing efforts within the university community to make sure that you're on point on this. What's happening on campus?
We have so many things. We've had a variety of interventions available for people who are hurting. There are people who have been traumatized by witnessing this violence. So virtual cafes have been afforded for students to have an opportunity to process their emotions with all of the tragedies piling up in the midst of a pandemic. We have a health crisis in addition to a racial crisis, and the two together are compounded. So with virtual cafes and speak out dialogues, we recently had an inclusive excellence forum where people throughout the university, faculty, staff, and students were able to come together and process areas from advocacy to Black identified spaces to white privilege and fragility. These are domains that people can have difficult conversations and advance the mission of social equity.
We have to take a break in just about a minute and a half or so. Tell us about how universities within the setting, whether it's Wright State or some others, have really tried to advance inclusiveness and to make that very overt in a very public way and say, hey, this is our mission.
I believe that process has been done very well in many universities, including Wright State. That process involves all parties. You need to have inclusion to address inclusion, and each person's perspective is valuable in looking at which group they represent. So inclusive excellence is a mission at Wright State right now, and looking at how do we look at policies as well as the student experience and employee satisfaction as well to make sure that every voice is heard. We have sustained policies that will advance equity in all spheres of functioning in the college campus. And we must also look at impacting not just our local area, but our state and our national forums. So finding partnerships to do such as that would be perfect. Recently, we partnered with a civil rights attorney to give us key strategies. And we had a training. How can you advance long-term change? It was a fantastic workshop. And in the event that we ever have someone becoming complacent, we can now revisit it with a format for social change.
I can see how that would be of great value because you're trying to constantly move this issue forward. It never really rests.
Unfortunately, we need to be aware that the dynamics are changing, but the problem remains. And while it's disproportionately affecting people, everyone can be a part of the solution.
And we'll return to our conversation with Latrell Jackson at Wright State University in just a minute. You can find much more information about what's happening at the university. Their website, it's all at wright.edu. This is WHIO Reports. Thanks for being with us. We're talking with Latrell Jackson at Wright State University about what we can do in our own lives. This is all to advance the cause of social justice and racial equality.
Well, I think there's actually two areas. There are two areas you need to focus on. One is action steps. One action that you can take is to make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure that you make it to the polls and levy your opinion for who is the leader that you want to lead our community. The other part is more on a social level. I actually look at it from a framework of breathing. B for breathe is looking at bravely challenging injustice, making sure that you don't walk away from difficult conversations. Challenge those points that may be raised in social contexts that are not appropriate. Do not be silent. Respect for people's lived experiences are. That way you have a mutual awareness and compassion for one another. E, exemplify value for all humans in every facet of your life. A, acknowledge the need for action and then do something about it. We've learned from our Representative Congressman John Lewis, when you see injustice, when you see something that is not right, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. This is the time for action. T, train yourself to listen twice as hard as you want to speak. That's a key. H, help someone in the struggle to find justice. And E, empower others to make changes in their community. So those are action steps, and it all fosters a sense of mutual awareness and common commitment.
We're talking with Dr. Latrell Jackson of Wright State University. So let me test your level of optimism. In many of the interviews I've done, so many people have been around, perhaps not you, but have been around a very long time on this issue and have thought, here we are again. We're still working. We're still working to get inclusiveness, even within their own community. But how about you, your level of optimism right now?
I am very optimistic because I see systemic changes already occurring. I see people revisiting policies and laws that may not be equitable for all people. They may be disproportionately enforced. And I believe that there are waves and pockets of advocacy that have been untapped yet. And while we may feel discouraged on one level, that we're back here again, my proposition is we might not have ever left. We're not back again. It was already there. However, I see 2020 as the year of clear vision, and I believe that clear vision can show us some things that are not always pleasant, but we do have a commitment to do something about it. Once we see it, we can address it. We can form allies with other groups, other populations, if you will, and I see that diversification. When you see the protests, you see wide-range diversity present. That's empowering. That's positive.
Dr. Jackson, thanks. It's been an education. We'll check back at some point in the future to see where all of this leads, especially at Wright State University. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Again, Dr. Latrell Jackson, the interim dean and professor, the School of Professional Psychology at Wright State University. You can learn more on their website at wright.edu. Next week, we'll take a closer look what's happening with kids going back to school in their local school districts. It's been great to have you with us on the program this morning. Thanks to our guests. I'll see you next week. I'm Jim Oddie on WHIO Reports.